Most people think that when an avoidant pulls away, goes quiet, gives mixed signals, or suddenly acts tender after distance, it must mean one simple thing, that he loves you. That deep down, underneath the confusion, underneath the hot and cold, underneath the hesitation, there is some great feeling trying to fight its way to the surface. And sometimes there is feeling there. Sometimes there is real attachment there. Sometimes there is even love there. But here is where you have to be very careful, because the pain you are in right now is not coming from a lack of feeling alone. It is coming from trying to decode whether what he feels is enough to build a life on. You are replaying the exact phrase he used. You are asking yourself whether he meant it when he said he needed space, whether he panicked, whether you misread the moment, whether the distance is fear rather than indifference. And when you are tired and alone and the day has finally gone quiet, that question becomes louder than anything else. If he acts like this, does it mean he loves me? It may mean he feels something. It does not yet tell you what he can do with that feeling. Here's the truth. A lot of women stay trapped for months, sometimes years, not because they are weak, not because they are foolish, but because they mistake emotional intensity for emotional availability. Those are not the same thing. An avoidant man can miss you and still not choose you. He can feel drawn to you and still not show up in a way that protects your dignity. He can think about you constantly and still offer the bare minimum when he has the chance to do more. And that is the cruelty of this dynamic. It gives you just enough warmth to keep hope alive and just enough absence to keep your nervous system in question. So you start studying details, the delayed text, the sudden check-in, the tenderness after distance, the way he opens up right when you are about to leave, the way he seems most present when he senses he might lose access to you. You call it love because you need a word big enough to justify what this has cost you. But the more useful question is not whether he loves you. The more useful question is whether his way of loving has any room in it for your self-respect. Here's the thing. Avoidant behavior often looks most affectionate at the exact moment commitment feels furthest away. That is one of the reasons it is so confusing. When there is space, he can feel. When there is pressure, he contracts. When you move toward him, he experiences closeness as demand. When you step back, he experiences your absence as loss. So yes, sometimes the sudden softness means you matter. Sometimes the reaching out after distance means he feels your absence. Sometimes the little signs, the careful questions, the nostalgia, the hovering at the edge of your life, the orbiting, mean his emotions are real. But real emotions are not the same as real readiness. Someone can love you and still be limited in how they love you. That may be the most important sentence I can give you tonight. Someone can love you and still be too afraid, too defended, too emotionally immature to love you well. And if you miss that distinction, you will hand your time to his limitations and call it patience. Picture this. It is 11 at night, your phone is face down on the nightstand, and you are replaying the moment he went cold after being close. Maybe it was after a wonderful weekend. Maybe it was after a conversation that finally felt honest. Maybe it was right after he looked at you in that way that made you feel seen. And then he withdrew. He became vague. He took longer to answer. He acted as if the very thing he had invited now made him uncomfortable. So what do you do with that? Do you call it fear because the connection was real? Do you call it love because his distance arrived right after intimacy? Or do you call it what it is, which is a pattern in a man who feels the weight of closeness and doesn't yet know how to stay in the room when it arrives? This is where so many women betray themselves, not because they care, but because they give his potential more spotlight than his behavior. You start protecting his narrative at the expense of your own. You become a translator for his silence. You become an advocate for his confusion. And the more energy you pour into explaining him, the less energy you use to see what this is doing to you. Here's what most people miss. Avoidant men do not always run because they feel nothing. Quite often, they run because they feel too much and do not have the internal structure to regulate what closeness awakens in them. Love touches the bruise. Intimacy exposes the limitation. Vulnerability threatens the old choreography that kept them safe. So they create space. They become inconsistent. They say they need time to think. They reach toward you and then recoil from the very warmth they wanted. Does that mean you imagine the connection? No. Does it mean the connection is enough? Also no. You have to hold both truths without collapsing into fantasy. He may care deeply. He may miss you. He may think of you with real affection. He may even compare other women to you and feel the dull ache of not finding the same depth. But what if his care still cannot create consistency? What if his affection still cannot produce courage? What if his love, such as it is, keeps you in second choice territory because he only accesses it when you are slipping away? Then the issue is no longer whether he loves you. The issue is the standard. He didn't expect you to stop explaining yourself. He expected you to keep offering reassurance instead. He expected you to send one more thoughtful message, to smooth over the tension, to make his withdrawal easier for him to live with. And when you did not, something happened that he could not immediately control. The dynamic changed. The upper hand he thought he had, the one where he could retreat and still trust that your energy would remain available, began to wobble. Not because you were playing a game, not because silence is a trick, but because for the first time he had to meet the echo of his own behavior without your warmth cushioning it. What does an avoidant do when the usual reassurance is gone? He begins to listen for it. And here's the thing, the listening is often where his feelings become loudest to him. I want to pause on that for a second. There is a profound difference between love being present and love being usable. A man may feel the absence of you with startling intensity. He may wake up to the void your presence used to fill. He may scroll, remember, compare, revisit, reach, retreat, circle back, hover. But can he stay? Can he name what is happening? Can he tolerate the uncomfortable vulnerability required to love someone in daylight and not just in private reflection? That is the test. Because many women get caught in the mythology of the reunion long before they ask whether the reunion would actually be safe for their heart. You do not need more evidence that he has emotions. You need evidence that he can bear the weight of them without disappearing. Otherwise, you are not in a love story. You are in a pattern. And here's something most people don't see coming. Your silence after his withdrawal does something to him that conversation often cannot. It creates a room he has to enter alone. At first, it is only a small absence, a missed response, a missing warmth, a change in the usual current between you. Then that absence becomes a vacuum. The familiar source of comfort is no longer rushing in to regulate his discomfort. Then the vacuum becomes an echo. He hears his own distance coming back to him in the quiet. He starts to wonder why you are not chasing, why you are not asking, why you are not handing him permission to stay half in and half out. And the wondering matters because it introduces weight. The weight becomes inquiry. Inquiry becomes reckoning. Reckoning becomes the strange enclosed atmosphere of his own making, like a terrarium he built years ago to protect himself. Only now he is trapped inside it with the humidity of his own defenses on the glass. He can finally see the pattern because there is no longer enough noise to hide it. Let me be clear about one thing. I am not telling you that silence is a tactic to make someone miss you. That is too shallow, and frankly, it insults your intelligence. Silence is not powerful because it manipulates him. Silence is powerful because it stops you from doing the emotional labor that allows his confusion to remain unexamined. It is a boundary before it is a strategy. It is self-respect before it is mystery. It is dignity before it is magnetism. And ironically, that is exactly why it can become magnetic. Why? Because people feel the difference between someone trying to control the narrative and someone reclaiming her center. He can feel when your silence is full. He can feel when it is not a performance, but a return. He can feel when you are no longer standing in the wings, waiting to be called onto the stage of his indecision. And that unsettles him, because the version of you who was willing to wait was part of his comfort. He didn't expect you to become harder to reach emotionally. He expected you to remain close enough to want and far enough not to require anything. He expected you to hold the door open while he wandered in and out of the orbit. He expected your loyalty to stay put while his certainty did not. And when you stopped doing that, the power shift was not dramatic, it was subtle, quiet, almost invisible from the outside. But inside him, it created friction. Why does friction matter? Because avoidant people often do not confront themselves in comfort. They confront themselves when the old pattern stops working, when the script changes, when the woman they assumed would keep translating their ambivalence begins to speak a different language altogether, a language made of self-worth, time, and non-participation. This is the part nobody's going to like hearing. Some avoidant men will come closer precisely because they can feel you moving on, and that closeness will still not mean they are ready. It may mean they are activated. It may mean they feel threatened by the loss of connection. It may mean their attachment system has lit up because your absence finally pierced the numbness. But activation is not commitment. Panic is not devotion. Nostalgia is not maturity. You have to stop treating his most emotional moments as the truest moments simply because they are intense. Often the truest moment is not the passionate return. It is what happens after the return, when steadiness is required. Can he remain open once the immediate fear of losing you subsides? Can he keep choosing you when there is no crisis forcing him to feel? That is where love either becomes real in practice or collapses back into self-protective instinct. I'm going to say something and some of you will disagree. There are avoidant men who love deeply. There are avoidant men whose feelings are profound, sincere, and lasting. But the woman who builds a healthy life does not measure love by depth alone. She measures it by responsibility. She measures it by whether his feelings produce behavior that honors her dignity. Otherwise, what are you really admiring? The private emotional weather of a man who still leaves you standing outside in the rain. And I know that sounds blunt. And a part of you wants me to say that if he is conflicted, if he is hot and cold, if he watches your stories, if he reaches out with little breadcrumbs, if he seems softer when he thinks you are gone, then it must mean you are special. Maybe you are special to him. That still does not mean he is presently capable of building something safe with you. Your specialness does not cancel his limitations. Now, let me explain something slowly. An avoidant man often experiences connection in two stages. In the first stage, when there is enough space, he idealizes. He feels drawn. He enjoys the mystery. He likes the connection because it has not yet challenged his autonomy. In the second stage, when emotional reality arrives, he feels exposed. Your needs become real. His role becomes real. The possibility of being known becomes real. And suddenly, what felt beautiful feels like pressure. So he distances. Then once distance returns and your warmth is no longer immediately available, he feels the loss of what he pushed away. That is why his behavior can look like affection after retreat. It is affection filtered through fear. So should you read that as love? Sometimes yes, but more accurately, read it as conflict. Read it as attachment colliding with defense. Read it as his nervous system telling the truth before his character has learned how to honor it. He starts to wonder why you are not chasing. And here's the thing, the wondering is what undoes him. He begins to ask whether he misread your availability. He starts to feel the absence of your messages in the little spaces of the day where he assumed you would still be. Does he name this as grief? Usually not. He names it as curiosity, restlessness, irritation, distraction. But underneath those words, something more intimate is happening. He is being deprived of the easy reassurance that you remain emotionally parked where he left you. And when that reassurance disappears, the story he was telling himself becomes less stable. What story? That he could step back without consequence. That he could preserve connection without choosing it. That he could keep you in soft orbit while he figured himself out. Your silence becomes the mirror held up to that fantasy. Think about it like this. Chasing someone who keeps pulling away is like trying to hold a volleyball underwater. You can do it for a while. You can use both hands, your body weight, all your concentration. But the entire time, force is required to keep the thing from becoming what it naturally wants to be. The second you stop pressing, it flies up to the surface with shocking speed. That is what many women are doing in avoidant dynamics. They are using labor, empathy, flexibility, patience, analysis, and self-betrayal to hold together something that will not stay down on its own. And then when they finally stop, the truth rises. Does he move toward you because he loves you? Maybe. Does he move because the natural distance reveals what your effort had been masking? Also maybe. Either way, you learn something vital. You learn what remains when you are no longer the one holding everything in place. He didn't expect you to protect your peace. He expected you to protect his comfort instead. He expected you to keep making the situation understandable, manageable, gentle for him. He expected you to tell yourself a more flattering story about his inconsistency than his actions actually deserved. And when you stopped doing that, he felt something deeply uncomfortable. Not because you punished him, because you removed the cushion. There is a difference. Avoidant people are often accustomed to others softening the consequences of their withdrawal. They date generous women. They lean on women who can see nuance. They benefit from women who are patient enough to imagine the wound beneath the behavior. But understanding somebody's wound is not permission to abandon your own standard. Compassion is not a contract to tolerate emotional immaturity indefinitely. Here's what most people miss. The very behaviors you are tempted to romanticize may be the evidence of his struggle, not the evidence of his readiness. When he sends a message after weeks of silence that feels startlingly tender, it may mean he misses you. When he remembers a detail about your life and reaches out on that basis, it may mean his feelings have depth. When he is most vulnerable, just as you begin to detach, it may mean he feels the loss acutely. When he says no one gets him the way you do, it may even mean he knows exactly what he is losing. But do you hear the hidden problem in all of that? The tenderness appears at the edge of loss. The openness appears when the distance is safe enough for him to feel. The love, if that is what it is, appears in flashes around absence rather than in the steady architecture of presence. And that is why you cannot build your future on moments that only arrive when something is ending. Let me be clear about something. Love that only appears when you are leaving still leaves you lonely. I need you to hear that. Love that panics when access is threatened but disappears when closeness is offered is not yet stable enough to hold your heart. You do not need to become colder to see this clearly. You do not need to demonize him. You do not need to deny the good moments. You simply need to stop confusing emotional truth with relational skill. He may truly feel for you. He may be haunted by the breakup, or by the almost breakup, or by the slow drifting apart he helped create. He may even imagine a reunion, but imagination is cheap when nobody is required to change. The real question is whether he can enter a different pattern than the one that made you doubt yourself in the first place. Imagine being the version of you he knew 6 months ago, or a year ago, or the version of you from the first night this began to hurt. She was still trying to make sense of him. She was still available to the idea that if she just loved cleanly enough, softly enough, patiently enough, he would feel safe and stay. She was willing to explain away the gaps. She called inconsistency confusion. She called crumbs progress. She called the bare minimum complicated. But that version of you is not the version sitting here now. Now you have seen what the pattern costs. Now you know what your body feels like after waiting. Now you know how much of your day can disappear into decoding one person's energy. And that matters, because even if he comes back, he is not coming back to the same woman. The you he drifted away from no longer exists in the same way. Silence has been changing you too. What is your silence doing to you? It is giving you your attention back. It is letting your nervous system stop auditioning for reassurance. It is returning your self-worth from the stage where his behavior had placed it under interrogation. Does it hurt? Of course it hurts. Silence is not numbness. Silence is often grief with posture. Silence is longing with a boundary. Silence is the first moment your body realizes it will not be sent back into negotiations that cost dignity. And in that quiet, something begins to reorganize. You eat without checking your phone every 4 minutes. You laugh once and forget to be sad for an entire minute. You hear your own thoughts without his narrative interrupting them. A reset, a rebuild, a return. He didn't expect you to grow in the space he created. He expected you to remain suspended there instead. He expected the gap to freeze you, not transform you. He expected time to preserve his access, not alter your standard. And yet this is what strong women eventually do. They become less available to confusion, not because they are bitter, but because clarity has become more attractive to them than chemistry. They begin to understand that magnetism is not improving their patience. It is in becoming deeply aligned with themselves. What is self-respect in practice? It is the refusal to keep offering intimacy where there is no safe place for it to land. It is the refusal to make a home inside someone else's ambivalence. It is the decision not to hand your softness to a man who treats it like something he can visit without tending. And here's something most people don't see coming. When you become truly quiet, not to perform absence, but because you are reclaiming your life, you often become more mysterious to him than when you were fully available. Why? Because he no longer has the script. He no longer knows exactly where he stands in your internal world. He no longer gets to assume your warmth is waving wings for him whenever he wants relief from the void. Mystery is not about games. Mystery is what naturally arises when someone no longer has unlimited access to your inner life. And yes, that can be magnetic. But again, magnetic does not mean safe. It may draw him toward you. It may make him feel the comeback. It may tempt a reunion. But your job then is not to melt because attention has returned. Your job is to see whether the man before you has actually changed the pattern or is simply reacting to the loss of control over it. So what if he comes back softer? What if he says he has been thinking about you? What if he admits he got scared? What if he says no one feels like you? What if he says he wants to try again? The answer is not to punish him. The answer is not to prove that you can now do to him what he did to. The answer is to slow everything down and make him live in the truth of his words long enough for behavior to either support them or betray them. Does he tolerate accountability? Does he remain emotionally present when the conversation becomes real? Does he ask what this was like for you without turning the spotlight back to his confusion? Does he respect your boundary when you no longer accept vague contact on his terms? That is where your dignity now lives, not in whether he returns, but in whether you are willing to require substance once he does. Now, let me explain something slowly. Calm re-entry into your own life is one of the most underrated parts of heartbreak. Not grand reinvention, not a theatrical glow, just re-entry. Make your bed. Answer the friend you have been postponing. Take the walk even if it is only 20 minutes and your mind follows him the whole way. Put proper food in your body. Move your limbs enough to remind your system that you are not trapped in a chair waiting for a text. Retie the loose ends of your days. Pay the bill. Clean the corner of the room that has started to resemble your internal state. Return to one thing you used to do before this dynamic colonized your attention. Read 10 pages. Stretch. Call your sister. Book the appointment. Repair the tiny pieces of ordinary life that rejection tries to convince you no longer matter. Why does this help? Because heartbreak shrinks your world around one person. Practical care widens it again. I want to walk through this with you one piece at a time. In the morning, do the next useful thing before you do the next painful thing. That means before you replay the message, brush your teeth. Before you search for signs, open the curtains. Before you diagnose his energy, drink water. This sounds almost too simple, but simple is exactly what your body trusts when your mind is spiraling. In the afternoon, Put one human being in front of your loneliness if you can. Not to talk about him for 3 hours. Just to remember that there are rooms in which your entire identity is not tied to one unresolved story. In the evening, if the ache comes back hard, let it come without using it as permission to reach for what repeatedly destabilized you. You are allowed to miss him. You are allowed to grieve what was beautiful. You are allowed to feel tenderness towards someone who's not able to meet you. None of that requires you to abandon your boundary. And if he does return, let the pace be the proof, not the speech, not the tears, not the intensity, pace. An avoidant man who has actually done some work will not just express fear of losing you. He will tolerate the structure required to keep you. He will answer the hard question. He will accept that trust is not restored by one emotional conversation. He will not ask for instant access because he feels sincere today. He will understand that your self-respect has a rhythm now, and that rhythm does not speed up simply because his longing has finally caught up with your pain. If he becomes impatient with the very accountability that healthy love requires, that tells you everything. It tells you he wanted relief, not repair. He wanted reconnection without reckoning. He wanted the warmth back without confronting the pattern that made the warmth unsafe. And that is not enough. Here's the truth. Sometimes when an avoidant acts like this, it does mean he loves you. It means the feeling is there. It means the absence has reached him. It means the echo got through. It means the silence he thought he wanted became a silence he could hear himself in. But love is not the finish line of this story. Capacity is, courage is, consistency is. A man can love you and still not be ready to stop protecting himself at your expense. A man can love you and still ask you indirectly to live inside his limitations. A man can love you and still not be the man you can safely choose. So do not let the question become too small. Do not ask only whether he loves you. Ask whether the version of love he offers honors your dignity. Ask whether his presence brings steadiness or just intermittent relief. Ask whether your self-respect grows around him or keeps negotiating itself downward. That is your real compass now. And if the answer is not yet clear, let the silence keep teaching you. Let it show you what he does without your labor. Let it show you who you become without his confusion at the center of your days. Let it show you whether this is a reunion worth having or a breakup that finally returned you to yourself. That matters. Your dignity matters. Your self-respect matters. And any love that asks you to forget that was never enough.